I started my career in interior design, which is quite different from like UX where I am today. Later on, I kind of like advanced in graphic and moved on to like UX. I've worked in variety of industries, like starting with a design studio called Design Work. I also worked in healthcare for a short period of time. And then my focus has been majorly on like fintech, AI, and crypto. On the blockchain side, it's interesting because often we think that blockchain is very tech heavy and people still don't understand the value of bringing UX designers into the space. There are very few designers like who are like working in the space, particularly because I think probably they have this fear that, oh, I need to have like certain level of understanding around like blockchain. As designers, we can create more impact in the 0 to 1 space because usually stakeholders have this idea, but we can bring that into reality.
Hey Samiksha, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. So let's kind of start with your introduction for the audience out there, and then we'll go more deeper into your journey.
Sounds good. Yeah, my name is Samiksha. I've been in the product design slash UX industry for about a decade now. Interestingly, I started my career in interior design, which is quite different from like UX where I am today. Later on, I kind of like advanced in graphic and moved on to like UX. I've worked in variety of industries, like starting with a design studio called Design Work. I also worked in healthcare for a short period of time. And then my focus has been majorly on like fintech, AI, and crypto. So that's pretty much it. But outside of my professional work, I am very active in the design community as a member of RGD. I'm one of the advisory group members. I'm also VP of AIG Miami here in the US, and I do provide mentorship on ADP list.
Really sounds a fascinating journey for you. So I do want to ask around, like, how did you got into even in like fashion, like interior design, and kind of thinking about that, and then how did you thought, like, when did you thought kind of you want to transition to UX or like that space?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, my starting point was my dad is an interior designer. So, back in India, I grew up going to like housewarming parties, like looking at the details. And, because my dad is an interior designer, I often saw people coming to him, like appreciating his work, design details. So that's what really led me into design. And I thought, like, naturally, I wanted to get into interiors. Later on, when I was kind of at Trishti school doing kind of like my post graduation, I came across UX. It was a very new field. There was a lot of buzz around it. Like NID had like one of the first few courses, but people were talking about it quite a lot. And I was very fascinated by it. So I moved to Canada, and at the moment, like there were very few UX programs that were offering like formal education. So I took an unconventional path, learned about like visual arts and design in general. But I was always, curious about like the technology side of it and the blend of like design and tech. So I actually like learned a lot from like my peers, like mentors. I participated in like hackathons organized by actually TD Bank. At the moment, I didn't work at TD Bank. So it was a very interesting journey. I learned so much from like mentors. I used to use like different applications, and I was often like fascinated by how designers think about like user experience in general. And that's how I kind of like landed my first job at Shutterstock, which was a very exciting opportunity because in Toronto it was still like a startup, and they were building a lot of like collaborative platforms to build like bring businesses and like end photographers together on one platform.
I think that's definitely like you working at different industry. That's what we want to capture as well. How kind of those experiences shape to where you kind of, I think now you have been really pivoting towards Web3, crypto, finance, kind of, that's what I've seen your trajectory to be like. So let's go a little back and kind of start with this question. So your career has been kind of spanning across fintech, AI, blockchain now recently, and you have worked with companies like Circle, Shutterstock, TD. What kind of drew you towards kind of designing for these kind of complex or like emerging tech industries?
Yeah, I mean, I personally really like challenging myself, and technology is a very fascinating field. Like often designers, because we are like creative thinkers, and we're really good at visual arts and all. We often feel like maybe this is not like the right fit for me, maybe it's too complicated, I need to have like a strong understanding. But I always challenge myself and I was like, we'll see how it goes. And I want to learn about, I want to be at the cutting edge of technology. Like when fintech was like really evolving, like TD Bank was one of the first few banks who were evolving the banking industry, particularly around like pandemic time, because everything was moving like digitally. And I wanted to just experience that and see what it looks like. How can I really understand like what the user needs from a digital space? But going back to my point, like even when I was an interior designer, I was constantly thinking about how I could design like spatial designs for people who are going to use those spaces. So the thought process and the mindset was like kind of consistent throughout like all the different disciplines of design. But it always excited me to working in an emerging technology field and just telling everyone that, hey, I'm learning something new and I'm trying to create an impact as a designer, particularly in industry which is still evolving and needs a lot of like design involvement.
I think that is fascinating to see how you kind of brought the parallels between designing for like a spatial space as compared to designing for these techs. I do have a very interesting question because now you are in US, but you are in Canada as well, and you started in India. Do you think if you did not come to like North America and you stayed in India, would you still be designing for these industries?
I think so. I feel like users are like still the same everywhere, but I feel like one thing that may have been different is that culture kind of impacts quite a lot like your user behavior. And I'll give you an example. Like Web3 is an interesting field where we are still learning a lot about like how people want to use this space. And last year, I traveled to Indonesia for one of the research that we were doing, and it was really exciting to see and hear from people how they think about money in general in different cultures. Like in the Eastern cultures, like communities are very closely knitted together. Like people have limited savings, they have like dependent families and all. Versus in the Western world, people have a very independent thinking. So the user behavior, the mental models kind of change between different regions. And I think wherever you are in the world, I think it is really exciting to sit down with these people and think about it. And internationalization, localization is like such a big thing. People often overlook it, but that is a big piece of like UX design in digital space.
No, I think totally agree. I don't think how you said kind of culture kind of impacts the design. I think I agree, and a lot of people who would be listening would also agree that definitely, depending on that, you may want to change your insights around what you are trying to develop. Let's go forward to the next question. Like you definitely have a very strong background in designing for like 0 to 1 products. And as you said, you're trying to be more in the challenging space or more in an ambiguous space for design. What do you think is like an approach that you take towards when you're working on these products where who may not have like a existing structure for it?
It's definitely a little bit more challenging to work in 0 to 1 because, again, you don't know how users are going to use the space. You just have a small vision in your mind. And I think one close example that I can think of is I'm recently getting very passionate about like gardening and growing plants in my house. And I think 0 to 1 is like if you're growing a new plant, like you have a seed, you have this idea, but you don't know really what the outcome is going to be. So you need to give it more time, like water it, like understand how much sunlight does it need. And 0 to 1 products are very similar to that. Like you have this idea, and I strongly feel like, as designers, we can create more impact in the 0 to 1 space because usually stakeholders have this idea, but we can bring that into reality with like the design thinking process. So it's definitely requires more time. You need to really understand the user mental models, their behaviors, spend more time with like your end customers. On the other side, if we kind of take the same example of a plant, like if the plant is already grown, like how much sunlight it needs, how much water it needs. So you need to keep maintaining it, but you already have some level of understanding about like how it functions. So again, bringing that same idea, like in the existing products, like people are already using it. You have some hypothesis, you understand like, how people, what are the design patterns they are used to it. So it's all about like evolving but learning from it, so it's a very iterative process in the existing one. But in the 0 to 1, of course, it's about like bringing that vision to reality. One point I do want to mention is, and this is something I've learned like working in this ambiguous space, is that I don't think as designers we should worry too much about being perfect in the 0 to 1 space, because the goal is not really about bringing a high fidelity, like, very visually crafted idea in the market. The goal is really to make something decent and functionable, but bring it to the market, like let people use it and then learn from it. But again, I mean, as we all know, like as designers, we cannot just stop after the product has been launched out. We need to keep moving on. But that's a much better approach, because you can learn so much by going out in the market and learning from like real users.
No, I think definitely a great insight. I think also 0 to 1 space are generally much more faster. So you it's very difficult to be perfect in that fast environment unless and until you are really into that. But I think totally agree. I think trying to iterate more faster, that's the way to go in the 0 to 1 space. So I think your recent work was kind of quite evolved or involved around Web3 and crypto. And that's a kind of industry which is, for me, I would say, as outsider, is really built on the trust for the user in that space, right? How do you think like this space, uh, the UX design in this space kind of differs when you're working in this decentralized finance space as compared to like a traditional fintech where you have also worked?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think crypto is a very new industry where it's kind of like two folds. Like even the users are trying to figure out like how they use this technology. They are learning about blockchain and all. But on the other side, even like businesses are trying to understand like what kind of products to build and all. So it's a very interesting space where I feel like as designers and like product thinkers, we can contribute so much. Versus on the other side, like traditional finance has been here like for decades. And during my experience at TD Bank, like in the traditional world, like again, as I mentioned, like in the pandemic, like people's expectations were changing quite a lot. Like they did not want to go to like ATM to like collect cash. Like they were expecting a lot from their mobile applications. And they really thought that, if I was able to order like my cash withdrawal, but maybe just go to the bank and pick it up, so I'm still like safe, or like mobile deposits and all. So during that time things evolved a lot, and that's when we were working on like predictive insights work and personalization, AI driven, which was very exciting. We learned so much about it. But I feel like as UX designers, we kind of need to bridge that gap between the web 2 and the web 3 world, because essentially end users are still the same, but we really need to adapt the UX patterns from web 2 and like traditional finance that people are already used to it, and bring it into the web 3 world to simplify products so much.
Interesting. I think what you said at the end, like when you're bringing products to these spaces, you want to simplify it in the way it's better for the user. I think that's really interesting to see. And also, I think this is an industry that has been there for a long while, but it's still that space where there's a lot of innovation that can be done, and is getting done nowadays. Uh, Now, the next question is more about what do you think are some biggest misconceptions people have when kind of designing for like a AI powered or like a blockchain based product?
Yeah, I mean, for AI, we talk a lot about automation, but there has to be a fine balance between how much you automate. I mean, your products at the end of the day, like we still have to design interfaces that allows user to control. Imagine like auto pay, like if you turn it on and you could never turn it off, like that's like so frustrating. And particularly in the fintech world, like this is like people's money, and people are very attached to, and I think they spend a lot of time. It's generally a very stressful like management. So the more we can simplify, the easier it is like for people, and it kind of like reduces their cognitive load. So it's definitely this kind of fine balance between like how much to automate. On the blockchain side, it's interesting because often we think that blockchain is very tech heavy, and people still don't understand the value of bringing UX designers into the space. There are very few designers like who are like working in the space, particularly because I think probably they have this fear that, oh, I need to have like certain level of understanding around like blockchain. But my experience has been different, where when I came from like traditional finance and went into like crypto, I knew about like finance in general, but I knew very little about like crypto. But just by joining a company that was building crypto products, like I learned so much. And I think the third one is really like often we as designers feel like, oh, we are like visual designers, like we are creative thinkers and we should like work in silos. And I feel like I've learned so much by partnering with my stakeholders, and they were not expecting me to do that. But the more meetings I joined, even if I was absorbing like 1% of the information, it made me a better partner. And at the end of the day, I understood the business more. So that's definitely, those are like some misconceptions. You don't need to have a lot of like technical knowledge. And I think it really fascinates me. The reason I like working at emerging technologies is because I feel I can create more impact. Like crypto is still very new, very few designers working. Like most people don't understand the value of UX. And I feel like I can have a strong voice and have a seat on the table where I can educate people around the value of UX. And we can definitely see that difference when a product is accessible, easy to use versus another product which is very tech heavy. Limited set of people are using it, but we need to make crypto more accessible by simplifying these products.
Interesting. So I do have a question which may be very useful to the people who would be listening. So crypto being the space which has not been penetrated with a lot of designers. First, do you think there is still demand for designers there? Second, if there is demand, what a person who is listening and who is trying to figure out his or her next job they can do now while they're still maybe building up stuff to have a better chance at getting into a crypto startup space.
Yeah, I mean, crypto is an interesting space. And to your first question, I think many people still don't realize the value of bringing UX designers on their team. I think that's where we need to kind of push a little bit further and say that, hey, I can be really valuable. And we've definitely seen that difference. Like Coinbase has a great design team. Like there are other companies out there who have, and we've seen the mass adoption. So there's definitely something valuable by bringing like great UX designers on the team. But somebody like who's really interested in getting into like the crypto space, I didn't have a chance to do this, but I would really say start simply by just understanding like the basics of crypto. You don't need to have technical knowledge. It's basically finance, like if you understand how the payment system works, how people transact money, like Venmo, Zelle, like some of these companies have simplified like sending money so easily. Like 10 years from now, like sending money to your parents abroad was not as easy as it is today. And that's where like again like UX kind of brings a lot of value by thinking about what are the complicated areas and where we can simplify it. And crypto is a perfect opportunity where some of these workflows are super complicated, they are very complex, but they don't necessarily have to be. I mean, once we understand the workflows, we can break it down and simplify so much more. And I think crypto is an industry where you can grow as a designer and you can have a lot of like impact. And even on your personal trajectory, like you can grow so much because you will have a stronger voice, you will be working with a smaller team, and you will be sharing like your expertise of and bringing like human-centered design into the team.
Well, interesting. I think that is definitely an interesting trajectory that people can definitely explore while they're kind of still figuring out what is the next thing that they want to do. Uh, but you said like definitely crypto is one of the misconception is crypto is not technical, but I think still there's a lot of especially with AI, like there are a lot of ML teams that you need to work with, and there's a lot of data folks you need to work with. Unfortunately enough, you have worked with a lot of machine learning teams and like data scientists. How do you kind of bridge that gap between like talking to them, like having that data driven decisions with that human centered design?
Yeah, I mean, at the core, like we really understand the human centered design, and that's like our fundamentals. So that's not going anywhere. But whatever the technology may be, but I think going back to my previous point, like as a designer, thinking yourself more as a product thinker and an entrepreneur has helped me a lot. Like if you just think you're a designer and that's what you need to do, I think the industry has changed a lot. And even when you're like giving interviews and all, there will be so many questions around collaboration. And that's because they're looking for designers who are willing to sit down with like some of these other team members, like product managers, engineers, ML, like data scientists, like collect data, customer success teams, and all, and kind of bridge that gap. But when I was working like in the AI space, it was optional for me to attend these meetings, but I learned so much from like the data scientists and like machine learning experts as they were building these models. And I learned about like the AI theories, like fundamentals, like psychology, like in the space. And I also faced a lot of challenges as a designer, which was actually a good thing, because personalization in AI is very tricky to test out. Like when we were conducting like user research, and I can give you an example, we were working on a use case and testing out like one of the partnership with like Starbucks. And of course, like as designers and our prototypes, like we have these functional prototype, and we were sharing with the users to receive their feedback. And because this was personalization, users often got stuck with, hey, but I don't use Starbucks, I use like Tim Hortons. But that wasn't the point. So personalization was really tricky to do like the user testing. And this is an interesting area, because you have to kind of think creatively. Like maybe I need to put my user in the frame first of a specific user, and think about, give them an idea that, hey, let's think about you as a Starbucks user. Now you go to the Starbucks, how would you react, or how would you behave in the space? So there were very creative ideas that we had to think around. We had to do a ton of like research and testing with the help of like research teams and all. So it's an interesting space. But going back to my point, like be more like a partner, and whenever you have like extra time, that's what I did. Like understand like the fundamentals of like AI. That will just help you have like a stronger confidence when you are like sitting in like meetings. You'll at least feel like I understand what they're talking about, rather than just like going blank. But yeah, again, like once you're like a great team member, you're collaborative, you're a partner, you can contribute a lot.
Interesting. And how do you think is like the best way, I would say, to, and this comes out to be kind of a more of a design question, like when you're doing handoffs, how do you make sure that your language, your design understanding and your language turns out and it's easily transferable to like an engineer or developer who's going to kind of make this into life?
Yeah. I mean, the world has changed, and now I don't follow waterfall. Like my engineers and my product managers are involved since the beginning. So it's not a surprise for them at the end when I'm giving them like a handoff and transferring like design files to them. Like they are constantly involved, and I'm getting their feedback. And that's where the Agile UX process kind of like comes in. But I've gotten better and better at managing my design files. And I've realized that it can create like a huge difference, because I kind of note down like the common questions that the front end engineers are asking me, and I figured out that there's a problem. So maybe I need to add like notes. So now I've created like my mini design system library within like my files, and I have like notes for engineers, I have notes for product managers, I have like logics where I want to say that this is how it should function. I have other things like prioritization notes. If I want to say that, hey, in this screen prioritize these 4 features, and if we have time, this is a nice to have. So those kind of communication through like your design files can be super helpful. But then also the other way to think about is like in user flows, like so just capturing like the happy parts first, but managing your files in a way so that there are edge cases they can get to that, because often the engineering team comes to the edge cases later on. Like first they are really thinking about just like happy parts and all. So I think it's really about, if you think of your engineers as like your users, how can you really design or organize your file in a way so that it's really easy for them to use, and that will reduce the questions from the engineers and give you more time to basically focus on like more important things.
No, I think definitely very interesting. I think handoff is one of the underrated part of being a designer, and I think it's very less focused on, but definitely really saves a lot of time if we do it really well.
Yeah.
Because I still remember with a lot of my projects, I had to do a lot of, in early days, I had to do a lot of back and forth with the developers to make sure that what I'm thinking they are developing. But then I realized there always is a, even though as many meetings I can do, there will always be a miscommunication. They cannot always reach out to me for everything, and they'll be like, this is the right thing that we think, and afterwards there will be a bunch of more bugs. So we rather have much better documentation with the handoffs as compared to the other way around. uh,
Mhm.
Amazing. So
One thing I would add is just
Right.
because I think you've brought up like a really great point is one of the frameworks that I really like using is the experience roadmap by IBM. It's a really great framework, particularly as you're growing into a more senior level, because people will ask you questions that, hey, what is the MVP? And this is also important in the 0 to 1 space. So experience roadmap allows you to align with your stakeholders around this is the MVP, this is our North Star metric. Let's decide on the different phases. How do we get to that final stage? And that's been like very effective for me when collaborating with like PMs and like engineers.
No, I think totally agree. I think, as we said, like these are some things that are really underrated, and people definitely want to kind of put a little more effort towards for the long run, being a better UX designer. Uh, Going forward, we definitely know that you have been kind of mentoring uh, and kind of you have been like a leader in the design space. What do you think is one common mistake you have seen young designers kind of do who are trying to break into the UX industry?
Yeah, it's what I mentioned previously, but having the fear of getting into UX design, like many mentees come to me and they are like, I don't know how to get into like UX design. It's like so complicated. It's actually not like as long as you still have the fundamentals of design, you understand how things work. Like that's the expertise you're bringing into the team. So I think being less kind of scared of like getting into like a very technology focused field is something I think every designer can do that. And the other one is really around focusing too much on visuals. So and when I say visual, it's basically visual design, but oftentimes when I look at the portfolios of people who are like looking for reviews and all, their portfolios have like amazing designs, like high fidelity, very well crafted and all, which is great. But as a UX designer, particularly when you want to grow, it's 50% your craft, but the rest 50% is your soft skills and your strategic thinking. That will take you like far. And I think there's just a lot of fear, and particularly when you're transitioning from another field, like such as like graphic design or like digital media or any other kind of related field. If you want to get into UX, there's this notion that it's very complicated, but it's actually not.
I think that's a definitely a valid point. I think fear in people definitely does not let them be at their best place. And second, obviously, I think visuals are not everything. They definitely are like the icing on the cake, but I think you still need to have a really good cake to kind of start off with. Uh, awesome. So I do have another question in this kind of manner towards what the future looks like for the young designers out there. With like AI coming in and these interesting spaces that you have worked across, uh, where do you see like the product designers role as a role is heading towards in like the next 5 years, and what do you think are the next skills which are going to make them the most relevant in the market out there?
Yeah, this is just my personal belief. What I've seen like over the time, I think in the future, the product design and the product management field is going to blend, because even today, especially like in startups and all, like a lot of the role of product managers and designers are kind of like overlapping, and you're expected to have that knowledge as well. So, and this is something somebody like one of the executives like told me a couple of years back, and now I think it makes a ton of sense, is that learn about product thinking if you really want to grow, because that will take you like far and help you in your career. Understanding like what your product managers do, where they are coming from. And I think it's fair to say that as designers, we can either incline towards product management or like engineering if you really like coding side of it. I was often on like the strategic thinking, like product management side, so I can definitely speak like more to that. But on the AI side, and this is funny because I hear this quite a lot, is that people are afraid that, hey, you shouldn't use like chat GPT like when you're writing or like when you're sending like messages to somebody. But I have a completely opposite thinking. I feel like if we keep pushing AI, I think we're going to miss that train. I think we need to jump on that train and learn about AI. And when I say AI, I think there are like two aspects to it. Like one is using AI agents, but the other one is also designing for AI driven like products. First one, I think again, like I think everyone today is using like chat GPT. I think it has really changed us. And I think it has, at least like I can say that it has made me a much better communicator. Like so many of us are not native English speakers and all, and it may take us like 30 minutes or something to write down. But if with the help of like, chat GPT or like AI, if you can be faster at what you're doing and write something in like 10 minutes, I think it's a much effective use of your time. So using AI, I think definitely learning about like PT, which is like prompt engineering techniques, and getting better at like providing inputs to the agent so you can get most out of it. But on the other side, when it comes to AI, designing for AI driven, I think there are like tons of courses out there now. Like I took it myself. Like I think on YouTube there was this 1 hour of course around like fundamentals of AI, and it kind of helps you understand like where the technology is going, what you need to learn about like generative AI, LLMs, AI agents is becoming like a big thing now. So just having like that basic understanding will just bring like more confidence in you, and I think you can contribute more. But I definitely want to iterate that I think you need to catch this train before it's too far, and we must adapt ourselves to this new world.
I think that is definitely true. I was just doing another podcast, I think the day before yesterday, and we were the the guest and me were talking about the same thing, and I was telling him the same logic that few years back I did a public speaking session back in Ahmedabad, India, and somebody asked me, and just ChatGPT just got like really famous, and there was a lot of myth behind what's gonna happen with AI. And somebody asked me, is AI gonna replace like a UX designer? And my simple answer was that AI may not, but somebody whom is using AI will definitely. So I think we have seen this trend. Like it's very pretty common. Like if you don't learn the new tech now, it is something like you're gonna be left behind, very honestly speaking. And I think even recently Meta laid off, I think 5% of their workforce. Even say as low performers, but they want to replace them with people they wanna who know AI, who want to work in AI specifically as a space, and who may do well in that space. So I think AI is the future, whether we believe it or not. It depends if we want to use it or if we want to work in it. That's definitely something we want to think more towards. Awesome. So I do come now to the last part of the podcast. It's like a fun part of the podcast. We do kind of a quick rapid fire round here. I'll just ask you a few questions. Maybe I'll just ask you 3 4 questions. You give me an answer right away. It's up to you if you want to explain why you gave that answer. All good?
Yes.
Awesome. The first one is, would you prefer traditional fintech or decentralized fintech?
Decentralized fintech.
Because it's more challenging.
It's definitely there's speed and there's low cost. There are definitely benefits to it, like without expanding it too much. But if you have to send funds abroad, you pay a ton amount of money just sending out like small amount of money. But with decentralized finance, you can be more quicker, more efficient with lower fees.
Very interesting. Okay. What's one UX tool you cannot live without?
Figma. I just love it the way they've evolved. I use the Figma slides, which is their new product for just creating like my decks, all my decks, and it's been so effective just to bring all my designs, show the interaction, and everything is just it's a one-stop shop for me.
Makes sense. What's the most underrated skill for a UX designer?
It's the collaboration. I think we're too afraid to collaborate with other people, but the more we do, the more far we can go.
No, I agree. Awesome. Another one, that's the last one. If you wouldn't be in UX, what career would you have pursued?
I had to choose any other field, it would be interior design. The reason being that I really enjoy experiencing spaces, different spaces. And when I have to pick a restaurant, I am biased. If a restaurant has good interiors, I would pick it over anything else. So I would love to do that sometime in the future as a side gig. I really enjoy that field.
No, that definitely makes sense. I think your background kind of obviously depicts that's where you started. So definitely something that is your passion. So amazing, Samiksha. I think your journey has been really wonderful, and I think uh, we definitely have tried to capture all the insights, all the amazing things that you have done, and definitely, hopefully, some the people who are listening, it helps them out. I'll definitely link down your socials in the description below for whoever want to reach out to you. Again, thanks a lot for kind of taking out the time for the podcast and coming on it.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome.